everybody and welcome back to the United Stand. It is Erik Ten Hag's press conference reacting to Erik Ten Hag's press conference for the Crystal Palace game coming up on Saturday evening. This is a big one. You can beat Southampton, that relegation fodder. You can beat Barnsley at League One. You can score 10 goals in your last 2 games. That's all absolutely fantastic. But reality hits on Saturday night. Have Manchester United made the improvement? Are Manchester United starting this better run of form now? Is this where our season begins? Or was it just the fact we could beat the lower teams and we've not actually got quite into gear yet? What is it going to be? I'm so excited for this Crystal Palace game. You've got Ugarte potentially starting. You know, Erik Ten Hag's talking about having the luxury of being able to pick from a squad now, pick a team. He's feeling confident going into the Crystal Palace game. He's been speaking about the Crystal Palace game. Also, more squad members returning from injury as Mason Mount and Rasmus Hojlund could be in contention to play against Crystal Palace. We're going to get Erik Ten Hag's update on that. But Crystal Palace is absolutely massive. It's massive for Erik Ten Hag and it's massive for this season. You know, shaky start. Yeah, we've had a good past couple of games, but this is where it really matters. Selhurst Park, it's been a tricky place for us to go. They're a good team. They've probably not started off the season in the way they thought they would, Crystal Palace themselves, but they're definitely a good team and it's going to be a tricky game. What are Manchester United made of? Erik Ten Hag lost more games away from home than he's won. Selhurst Park's always been a tricky ground for us to go to. Crystal Palace are a good team. Can we do it? There's so much positivity, but can Manchester United do it? And if we want to be getting into the top 4, if we want to be competing this season, if we want to prove the game against Liverpool was just a blip, this is the game to prove it in. And hopefully this can spur us on to have, you know, just get some points on the board and have that run of games where we're winning consistently. How many games can Manchester United win in a row? That's what I ask, because that's what top teams do. They win consistently, and that's what Manchester United have to do. But welcome everybody to the chat. Get all your comments in down below. Would you like to see Rasmus Hojlund play against Crystal Palace on Saturday? Should Mason Mount return, or should Erik Ten Hag not risk them yet and maybe roll them out in the Europa League game next week? Also, get all your thoughts in on the team that you would play and how you think we would do against Crystal Palace, because Erik Ten Hag has been talking and he said it's going to be a much different game than it was against Crystal Palace when Crystal Palace beat us 4-0 last season. That was a horror show, that game, weren't it? That was an absolute horror show. I just keep remembering on repeat when Michael Olise absolutely did Casemiro and Casemiro just got sent back to Real Madrid, got sent back to Brazil. Honestly, the way he just dived, and I think they brought out another like POV of that at the start of this season where you could say, I don't know if it was a body cam or something. It was just, you don't want to watch that back too many times, especially if you're Casemiro. Will Casemiro start? Get in the comments down below. But Crystal Palace last season, it's a night that we all wanted to forget. And it's been that way. I remember when Olise put in that free kick in like the last minute of the game it was. I think it was the season before that, and we ended up drawing 1-1, or they ended up winning 1-0, whatever it was. It's been a tough ground for us to go to, but Erik Ten Hag thinks it will be different. Everyone getting their comments in on the chat. It is nice to see you all. I mean, let's get started in some Erik Ten Hag quotes. Just straight off the bat, there's not a lot of them. I mean, it's a press conference, and we've got about 5 quotes. I mean, and you could basically call it 4. Because Erik Ten Hag answers the same question twice. Doesn't really like to give too much away in these press conferences, but because we've won our last 2 games, I'll let it slide. I'll let it slide, and you just got to take what you've got. Erik Ten Hag's never really been one to give too much away in his press conferences, but what we did get is some injury updates surrounding Rasmus Hojlund and Mason Mount. Now, Erik Ten Hag does keep his cards very close to his chest, but what he has said, he got asked about Mason Mount and Rasmus Hojlund returning to training. He said it's very good news. They are back on the pitch. They are back in team training. We have to decide whether they are fit enough to start on Saturday, but it's very pleasing that they are fit and back in the squad. So Rasmus Hojlund and Mason Mount have made their return before Luke Shaw has. I mean, I didn't see this coming. Who knows when Luke Shaw's going to be back? Malacia might be back before him at this rate. But the good news is that Rasmus Hojlund and Mason Mount's back. And the reason why that's good news is because I do actually think we have missed Rasmus. I think this is going to be a big season for him. I really like what Xerxes given us. And the question is, you know, when they're both fully fit and when Rasmus has worked his way back up to full fitness and he's ready to start games, who starts games? That will be a question for further down the line. But I do think Rasmus you know, barely got any chances last season. He's coming into a team that I think is going to create more chances for him now. I think we've seen that over the course of the first few games, despite how turbulent it's been. I think it's going to be a big season for him, and I think we have missed what he gives us, and I'm excited to see him. So that's great to have more than one option up front, because, you know, with Xerxes the last few games, it's like wrap him in cotton wool. He's our only striker available. We need a striker. So it's great to have Rasmus back. And plus, you know, if this was this time last season, we would have been having to play Rashford up front for all the games, because Martial was injured basically the whole season, and we had to rely on Rasmus Hojlund. And if we didn't have Rasmus Hojlund, it'd have to be Rashford up front, or it's a false nine. We've now got what Erik Ten Hag says, like depth, and you can pick between two strikers, and being able to bring Rasmus off the bench as well to have that impact. I mean, look at how well Garnacho's done the start of this season, because we've had the luxury of having that depth of players who are playing quite well, as in Rashford's picked up form the last couple of games, and it's allowed Garnacho to get that confidence off the bench and basically just, you know, he kind of looks revitalised, Garnacho, and he looks raring to go. He looks like he's chomping at the bit to start games, and that's exactly what you want. And I remember at the end of last season when we were playing that false nine, and Erik Ten Hag really did have to shore things up because we were leaking goals left, right and centre, and he opted for that false nine. And Rasmus was coming off the bench then, and he was scoring goals off the bench. He was making an impact off the bench. So, you know, these players are definitely going to have opportunities to start. Rasmus and Garnacho will both start a lot of games this season, I feel like. But having quality off the bench is a luxury that Manchester United haven't had. And that's really, really exciting, because what United have through the signings they've made this summer is they have squad depth. And that's so important, because, I mean, I was speaking to my friend about this, who's an Arsenal fan, and they were saying, I still think you need to sign more first-team players, like first-team qualities, and improvement on your starting 11. But he said, I've got to hold my hands up, like, your transfer window, you've got depth. And that's really important across the season. And that's what Erik Ten Hag alludes to in the next bit of his press conference, when we're scraping, putting together a starting 11 this season, even if we do get the odd injury here and there, which we hope we don't, we have got that squad depth. And the luxuries as well is you don't have to rush back Rasmus Hojlund, you don't have to rush back Mason Mount. And it is good news that Mason Mount's back as well, because he's been very injury prone in the start of his career at Manchester United with the number 7 shirt. You know, that shirt holds a lot of weight. There's a lot of pressure on Mason Mount to do well. I've said it so many times, I think he is a good player, but injuries have prevented him from showing his true potential in United shirt. When he got injured at the start of the season, after having a couple of good games, you thought, here we go again. But he's managed to make a return quite quickly. But what he's got to focus on is keeping fit. He has to keep himself fit. And in order to do that, I think Erik Ten Hag is going to really slowly ease Mason Mount in and really monitor his minutes as he's coming back into the team. But a lot of you guys would think he shouldn't really be starting anyway. I think he's super important to the way we press. I think he can be a super important squad player for us. Do I think he's got a big challenge on his hands to nail down a starting spot in that team when everyone's fit? Absolutely. But Bruno will need rests. He will need rest. We saw, you know, against Barnsley, he actually had a chance to have a rest there, and he comes off the bench and looks, I mean, it's against Barnsley, but looks good, gets 2 assists, and Bruno will need them rest. We will need Mount there. And, you know, it is a squad game. Such a good squad player for the energy he brings you. And I saw Mark speaking on the morning show today saying he won the most amount of duels. Most amount of defensive duels in the games he's played for Manchester United. I mean, again, that's something you want in that Erik Ten Hag high press, high turnover sort of system. So it's good to see Mason Mount back as well. But everyone, get your comments in. How are you feeling going into the Crystal Palace game at the weekend? Any questions or anything like that, make sure you get your super chats in and let me know all of your thoughts. Please hit a like on the video as well. We massively appreciate that. So Mount and Rasmus Hojlund return to training, but will they be in the squad? That is the big question. And he says on whether they'll be in the squad, he says, we have so many games in this block to cover. We are very, very happy. We have to make the final call. They did a couple of trainings, but we have to see how they recover. And tomorrow we will make the final call on whether they can be in the squad. So it's not confirmed that they will be in the squad, but I think there's a very good chance. I think there's definitely a good chance that Rasmus Hojlund could be in, because Mark was speaking as well and saying he was close to being back for Southampton. a week later, you would think he'll be in the squad for Crystal Palace and could get some minutes off the bench. I think Rasmus Hojlund probably has more chance of making it than Mason Mount, but you never know, they might both be in the squad. Or Erik Ten Hag might hold them both back because he really doesn't want to rush, and we have got players to cover it. We're not in desperate need right now. We'll have to see. But I think they will be in the squad. Because I don't know if United would have been like posting them pictures of Mason Mount and Rasmus Hojlund or the back yesterday. It was very public. I didn't know if they'd be doing that if it was uncertain whether they'd be in the squad at the weekend. I think they will be in there, but let me know what you think. Rob Zombie says Mainu needs a rest. He's a kid. Mainu got a full rest against Barnsley, and that was nice to see. Erik Ten Hag was listening. He understood. Mainu, bless his heart, he's been having to basically cover the midfield on his own for the start of this season. He's picked up a yellow card in every single game he's played. He's had the most interceptions out of any Man United player. That, to me, is a signal of how much we need to work on the midfield structure when we're off the ball and how much the midfield gets exposed, the fact that Kobbie Mainoo's had to do this. Ugarte, coming in to start, hopefully, against Crystal Palace, could be the game changer and could massively help out Mainoo as well and allow Mainoo to do what he does best. Press-resistant midfielder that can take the ball off the back four, distribute it through the midfield and progress the ball up the pitch. That's what Mainoo's for. Ugarte's there to clean up the mess, make them interceptions, do the hard work that people don't often see as the fancy stuff, but Ugarte's there to win the duels. And Mainoo will still win duels, of course he will, but he's basically had to balance the midfield on his own, and Ugarte hopefully is going to be a massive helping hand to Mainoo, and we can get the best out of him, which is what we need to do, because he's for me our biggest talent in that team, and we've not got the best out of him so far this season. You can still see his level. He's a top quality player, but I think we can get even more out of him, and I think Ugarte is going to be key to that. The question is Ugarte going to start on Saturday? I think he will. I think he has to. I think he has to for what he brings to the team, and this type of away game, it's gritty, you're against Palace, you know, it's going to be tough, you're away at Selhurst, it's a tough ground to go to. Ugarte is the type of character that you have to start in this game, especially considering our midfield issues at the start of this season. It would be massively harsh on Eriksen, but I still think Ugarte has to start, whether it's harsh or not. You know, this is the Premier League, this is Crystal Palace away, you know, there's no sentimentality. The fact of the matter is the best team to go out there and play against Crystal Palace should play. And I think Ugarte will. I think that's why he got brought off against Barnsley. But I would have loved to hear a question in the press conference. You know, is Ugarte going to... Ten Hag's never going to say, yeah, Ugarte's in my starting 11, but we could have had some sort of question about whether Ugarte's, you know, ready to start for Erik Ten Hag, whether, you know, he sees his midfield pairing as being Ugarte and Kobbie Mainoo, because that's what we were all assuming. But that question would have been nice to have in the press conference. Might be in the embargoed section, but there wasn't a question about Ugarte, which I find strange, because that's the big news for me. Is Ugarte going to start? Or even a question about Eriksen, saying, you know, is he going to start? Is he now moved his way into the forefront of your plans? Is it going to be hard to drop Eriksen? Some sort of indication over what the midfield's going to be at the weekend would have been a great question to ask in this press conference. Like I said, it might be in the embargoed section, but this section's so small, and I'm so surprised there was no question about the midfield, because I think that's such a massive one going into that game against Crystal Palace against Crystal Palace on Saturday, and I think Ugarte has to start. As good as Eriksen's been, I don't think Mainoo and Eriksen midfield is physical enough for Crystal Palace away. I really don't. So I would have liked to see a question on that, but there wasn't one, unfortunately, in this section of the presser. He then gets asked Ten Hag on the importance of managing injury issues. He says, careful and top football, you always go to the boundaries. It's not avoidable, but when you have a full squad available, then it's easier to manage the load. When you are in circumstances like last season, there is a need to play and you have to overload them. We hope we can integrate them in a very careful way. Ten Hag speaking about how now he's got a bigger squad, he's going to take his time reintegrating players, which is exactly what we've said. Hojlund or Mount, there's no need to rush him. Last season, you would have definitely been rushing Hojlund because we would have had no out-and-out striker, because we didn't have depth there, because Martial was just constantly injured. So that is the difference. And then you can risk reoccurring an injury. It puts a lot of stress onto a player. Do you get the highest performance out of that player? So hopefully, you know, with a better depth in the squad, you're also going to get higher performing players because they're going to be allowed to have that rest and they're not going to have to be forced to play every minute God sends. Apart from Dalot at the moment, he's having to do that because of our left-back issues. But if we had have signed a left-back, Dalot would have been able to have more of a break as well, and that could even, raises the levels because players get to rest and recover and play at the highest standard. And of course, when you're in a match rhythm, sometimes you keep that rhythm going and you build form, you build confidence. But the amount of games that footballers have to play, you need a squad to deal with that. And Ten Hag has been speaking about how important that's been, and he thinks that's going to be the deciding factor on how Manchester United are going to be a lot better of a team this season. Make sure you hit the like on the video, everyone. Erik Ten Hag did get asked about how United improved after the 4-0 thrashing against Palace in May. An evening that none of us want to relive. Nobody wants to relive that game. I spoke about at the start of the show. It was an absolute horror show performance from Manchester United. Midfield got sliced through like a knife through soft butter that's been left out on the side all day. No fridge in sight. Warm day. Window might be open. The butter, don't need to put it in the microwave at all. It just got sliced through. We can't be having that, which again is another reason why I have to stress how important I think it is for Ugarte to start. As good as Eriksen is on the ball, and it is harsh to drop him, technically when we're on the ball, no problems, but he's just not a physical player. And in a game that I think is going to be quite physical, he just could get bypassed. Like even against Southampton, before we got our foothold in the game, in the first 35 minutes, the midfield was struggling off the ball. On the ball, Eriksen, you never lose it. Off the ball, that's where the issues come in. So that's why I think Ugarte has to start. But Ten Hag on that game and how it's going to be different this season, he says, maybe you could also compare it with the FA Cup final. Then he says, don't compare it. A bit confusing, Eric. When you're just seeing a quote and you're not actually seeing him speak, you don't understand like the jest and the way he's saying it in, but that's what he said at the start. He said, the circumstances in the moment in the season from February on, we had to find every time 11 players who can construct a team. And we are now in a different place. We have 18 players, so we can pick a team from that. So Erik Ten Hag then again saying about the fact of the matter was last year, we basically didn't put out a team that was Erik Ten Hag's first choice starting 11. He had to just construct a team. We had makeshift left backs. We basically didn't have a left back. Johnny Evans was signed to be as good as Johnny Evans was, and I'm so glad he signed on for another year, and I respect him highly, what he's done in the game. He was signed on to be a backup centre-back. Johnny himself has spoken in interviews saying he didn't expect to play as many games as he did. He was consistently having to play. Martinez's injuries, Varane's injuries, Maguire's injuries, even though he stepped in and did a good job for us, he was injured a lot as well. We had injuries all across that back four all season. We had so many injury problems, and Erik Ten Hag had to basically, try and construct an 11 every single week, and that it is an excuse, but at the same time, this season it's not going to be an excuse because we do have more depth now and we've signed players, and you'd like to think that crazy crisis won't happen again, touch wood, but Ten Hag just says, the 4-0, it was totally deserved, but Saturday will be different. So Ten Hag saying it will be different now. I don't compare situations, but from February onwards, we had to find 11 players to construct a team. Now it's 18 and we can pick one. So him talking about how he can pick his best team, basically. And that is what the most important thing is. And Ten Hag can do that, and we finally do have a bit of depth. Like, even against Barnsley, the fact we could rotate quite a lot but still have a good team on the pitch shows we've started to create that bit of depth. And, Man United fans, I keep hearing fans saying, Garnacho and Rashford, who's going to play? Hojlund or Xerxes, who's going to play? What's going to happen with Dalot and Mazraoui when Luke Shaw's back? I understand it, I get the debate, but sit back and just be like, we actually can enjoy a bit of depth. It's not normal for players to play every single minute. Players can start one week, the next week it might be a different player starting in that position. You have to manage the workload. I mean, did you look at City's bench last night against Inter Milan? That's the difference when it comes to top football, fighting across a whole season with the strain it can put on you in modern football. That's what you've got to love, having depth. And Hojlund will get plenty of games, Xerxes will get plenty of games, Garnacho will get plenty of games, Rashford will get plenty of games. I mean, Mazraoui and Dalot definitely will get plenty of games because God knows what's going to happen with Luke Shaw and Malacia. But there will be games to be had. And even Bruno Fernandes, who plays every single minute, you know, he's going to have a rest at some point just to get the best level of performance out of him. Because I do think Bruno Fernandes, as quality as he is and as good as he is, if he had a bit more rest, I think you'd be able to see that high level of performance on a more regular basis. As you know, Bruno can go to having such a good game to then having a few games where he's a bit off, and he'll still be decent because he's Bruno Fernandes, but it won't be at the level you expect from him, and that's probably because he's playing too much football. So it's good to have that option, and I think Erik Ten Hag will be buzzing with that as well. And we have Kevin in the chat saying team strength and competition for places. Exactly. And you see, constantly pitting our players against each other, but what you really need to do is just be happy that you actually have a choice. We've been kind of starved of that for so long as United fans, that we're not used to it. And it's something that I could definitely get used to, but also no excuses for Erik Ten Hag. He has to deliver. It's all right beating Barnsley in the Cup. It's all right beating Southampton. You have to win against them sort of oppositions. Crystal Palace away, with respect, they actually have got a lot to offer, especially at Selhurst Park. It's a tough game in the Premier League. Now it's time to deliver, Erik and the team. But thank you very much for watching, everyone. That was Erik Ten Hag's press conference. Make sure you get in the chat all of your score predictions. How do you think we should line up against Crystal Palace? Are you excited for this game? Do you think they can get it over the line, or do you think we're going to fall again at the next hurdle? I think United are going to win, and I think we're going to go on a winning run as well. I'm feeling positive. Make sure you hit a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Mark will be back for the 7 p.m. show, I think, tonight, or maybe 7:30, because he'll be doing Champions League watch-alongs. Europa League for us next week. Excited for that as well. Got some good football coming up. But thank you, everyone, for watching. We will see you on the next one.